Sorry about that.
No problem. All right. Good morning and welcome to the February 10th meeting of the Design Review Committee. My name is Amy Perutsky and I am the chairman of the Design Review Committee. This open meeting of the Design Review Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of June 16, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the DRC are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Design Review Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to the Northborough Remote Meetings on the YouTube link via the link. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Let's see. The Design Review Committee works to preserve the historic land uses and structures and promote architectural and ecological considerations for the betterment of the community. We are an advisory board, and as such, the design review process is intended to provide guidance to the applicant in the development of the site and design of the building. The DRC does not guarantee approval of any special permits needed, as those can only be granted by the special permit granting authority. I will now confirm member access to this meeting. Lisa Maselli?
Here.
Dario Damar?
Here.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob Federico?
Here.
Okay, thanks. Meeting ground rules. The chair will invite each speaker or applicant on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants will provide their full name and hold until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait for until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others do so through the chair, taking care to identify themselves. Each vote taken by the board or committee will be conducted by roll call vote. It is now 8:37. And first on the agenda is the minutes. Dave is connecting right now, so I'll give him a minute to connect. I do want to thank Michelle for going back and watching the videos, and Michelle Silly, and she did some great minutes, and she had to go back and watch the last 3 videos.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'll pull up while Dave's connecting. I'll pull up. Does anybody, well, I'll pull up the first set of minutes. Let's see, we know that could take me a bit.
Whoops. Where are you?
Let's see. I only had very minor changes. Oh. Dave, are you able to, we just can't hear you.
No, yeah.
Okay, thanks. You didn't miss anything but the blurb at the beginning. But I did mention we're going to start out of order and do the minutes in case someone has to drop off. Because Michelle spent time doing the 3 sets of minutes. Did anybody have any changes or to the July 14 minutes?
No, not the first one. The next 2, I did a little teeny thing.
I just had quick ones if you guys don't mind. I don't mind. I don't know if I want to be called Chair Perutsky. Like I know on the planning board it's just Ms. Perutsky or Ms. Martinek. So I don't know. I don't have to be called Chair Perutsky in the minutes. So I just wanted to change those to Ms. It doesn't really matter, but
There you go. Found one of them.
Okay, and then on page 2, this paragraph where it says, Mr. Reardon said he understood that this is an industrial people in an industrial zone. I think it's just supposed to be building. An industrial building in an industrial zone. You guys agree?
Yep, that's one of mine that I caught.
And then it's just changing from chair to Ms. Paretsky, I think is the rest of it. Oh. And this is for Lisa, old new business. I think Ms. Maselli, you abstained from the minutes. So I just changed Ms. Maselli, who had not read them. I just wrote abstained.
Okay.
And that's it for those. Does anybody else have any changes to the July? I think, close your eyes, July 14th, 2021 minutes.
That one that you got for the industrial people is one of the ones that I found too.
Yeah, I thought that was industrial project.
Yeah, it could be project. I thought it was building, but we can change it to project. Yep, that might make sense. I was just trying to figure out what made sense. I didn't go back and listen to all 3 meetings,
Fair enough. Okay.
but project could be either way. Anybody else? Do I have a motion to approve the July 14th, 2021 minutes as amended?
Motion moved.
I second.
Okay, motion has been moved and seconded. I'll take a roll call vote. Lisa Maselli,
Aye.
Dario,
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes have been approved. I'm gonna stop sharing these. The next minutes were December 16th. I'm gonna scroll through fast. Don't close your eyes, see if I have any changes. Oh, I did. All right, do you want me to go first, or does anybody else want to go first?
You're doing a good job.
Okay, so I'll go down to page 3. Second paragraph. Ms. Nicholas said they meet with the applicant. I think the word was just missing.
It's the one I found.
And this sentence was kind of out of context. I didn't know we were talking about closing the meeting or continuing it. And I just took out that sentence because I felt it was out of place.
Yeah, it would sound like we're voting on approval as opposed to how we wanted to proceed with.
Right, but and even at that point, we weren't really voting or continuing. So I just took it out. And then in this paragraph, I just think there was an or missing. And then with Ms. Nicholas said that it is allowed, provided that it is documented. I think there are just a couple words that were missing. And that's all I had. Did anybody else have any changes?
Is this the meeting we had? Can you kind of go back, go up the pages so I can read them real quick?
It's December 16th.
Yeah, mine's on the computer, so I can't get it off right now. Okay, you can go faster.
That's page 1.
Okay, next. Okay, next. All right, what I don't know that it was on this meeting, or if, I thought I'd ask what the square footage was of the building.
That's at the next meeting.
Okay.
On the 30th.
Okay, then everything's fine in this one.
Okay. Everybody else good?
No.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the December 16th, 2021 minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion to-
Was that you, Dave? Or Dario? Who moved?
Dario.
Seconded.
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Lisa Maselli,
Aye.
Dario Demar,
Aye.
and Dave Aaron.
Aye.
Okay, the meeting's minutes have been approved. Third set of minutes. I can start again if you guys want. The same idea, I'll mention it to Michelle. I don't mind be calling Ms. Brutsky versus Chair. So for the December 30th minutes, I had page 2. That's where, Lisa, you asked about the size of the building. And I think you said it was approximately 3,200 square feet per duplex.
Okay.
And the next page, I just changed one sentence. She asked if specific plantings be used for the ground cover in the backyard could be added to the note put on the sidebar of the plan. The sentence was a little confusing to me, so I just switched around some of the words.
That's fine.
Okay, and that's all I have for changes.
I have none in addition to that other one. Nope.
Okay. Does anybody else have any changes to the minutes? And if you do, and if you didn't have time to read it, I could save these for the next one. Anybody else have changes?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. So if there are no other changes, I move we approve the December 30, 2021 minutes as amended. Is there?
Second.
Okay. Take a roll call vote. Lisa Maselli,
Aye.
Dario Demare,
Aye.
Dave Veron.
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are all done. All right, let me see. Next on the agenda, we had the 2 family guidelines. These were started back in 2018, but due to different reasons, we still have them in front of us. So what I was thinking of doing, and I don't know if anyone feels the same, I was just going to show I went out and took pictures of duplexes in the town, and I just want to show them really quick and see if anyone had anything that they thought about the duplexes that should be included in the design review guidelines for 2 family dwellings, or we could just go through the 2 family dwellings. I could share it and we could read the different suggestions and see if we agree with the criteria that's in the guidelines. Either way, but why I took pictures of the Northborough duplexes is because when I read the 2 family dwelling guidelines, I didn't feel the pictures actually matched what we have in Northborough. I felt that they were from the city and they would have to, a lot of them where it said encouraged, I would definitely not encourage for Northborough.
Are you planning on using those photos in our guidelines?
Well, you'd have to ask permission. Like our old guidelines, a lot of the encouraged photos were actually in town. So I think Kathy said if we use them, we would have to ask permission. I'm not sure. I wouldn't use any of them as discouraged because you wouldn't want to do that to someone.
I think
But-
you're also gonna, if you do that, you're also gonna have to go through legal as well, because you're gonna go into a legal quagmire of like and dislike, and you're gonna ruffle some feathers.
Well, I was only going to use the like. I wasn't going to use any dislikes. Oh, just you need ruffle feathers of the people who didn't get the likes? Yeah, they did it.
That is where when you want to hear from when we brought Judy in, I think was her name.
Judy Barrett. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I can't hear you that well.
It's hard to hear, Dave.
Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
It's better.
That was-
Nope.
What is going on? Can you hear me now? No. Zoom all day yesterday. Can you hear me now?
No, there's feedback. I don't know why. Jim, do you know why he'd be getting feedback?
I don't believe it's anything on our end. It might be a microphone, but you said you were zooming fine yesterday.
Yeah, I was on Zoom all morning.
Do you
Can
have
you hear me
a headset?
Nope. I'm doing it right now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Judy said, you know, that using photos in town causes a lot of problems. That's why she recommended for us going outside of town and not using anything in town. And I'm just voicing what she said.
Yeah. And the email we got from her just said that she didn't find a lot in Northborough because most of the duplexes were close to the city. But we can definitely, we'll check with legal counsel. Like the first 2012 guidelines have a lot of the commercial buildings in Northborough.
Yeah,
As-
I mean, I'm fine
Yeah.
with whatever. I just don't want to walk into a legal quagmire.
Yep, definitely. We'll definitely check and make sure. But these are just the pictures of duplexes in Northborough, and like I thought they were a lot different than the ones in the two-family guidelines, and they match the character of Northborough because we're not a city where, you know, you've got the small lots and you have to stack the driveways and stack the cars. Like I think in Northborough, at least in my opinion, people want each to have a garage because we're like a commuter town and people have cars. And so these were just some of the duplexes I found in town. The latest is, can you see, did I share my screen?
Yes.
The latest, this is the one on 399 Hudson Street. So it was the last duplex that was done.
It's a good comparison to see the drawing, the artistic rendition and the actual application. Although it's probably not done, right? It's probably got, is this completed and people are living in it now, or are they still getting it ready?
I don't know. The picture was taken yesterday, but they both sold. So I think people have moved in, but I don't know.
Right.
I think they're done because they sold.
Because it's interesting to see how the detail in the drawing to the left and then to the right, the center that has the two white, I don't know. Yes, that they just look like these two white boxes. Maybe it's just because of the photograph, but.
Well, the drawing actually has nothing to do with what was built. The proportions of the drawing show, 18 inches above the garage doors, and the garage doors being very narrow, and the actual garages look like they're probably 50% wider than what's in the drawing. So it's very deceptive.
Right.
With respect to what got built, what was drawn. In my opinion, they have nothing to do with each other, because the one on the left looks really nice, and the one on the right, the pitches went from 1212 to 412. It's a lie. It's not the same.
I agree completely. Those are not the same at all.
Right. And this might be, would it change if I made it bigger? Because I made this picture fit, so.
No, it's the proportions. It has nothing to do with it, Amy. That picture on
Okay.
the left, look at the windows. There's 6 windows between the gable on the one on the right. There's 3 on the one on the left. Look at the proportions of,
Right.
it's 1 foot, maybe 18 inches above the garage doors, and they're real tight. The one on the left, it's 3 feet above the garage doors, and there's 2 feet on each side of the garage doors. Has nothing to do with each other than a concept. And the concept falls apart with respect to what was drawn.
Okay. Is there something we can do in our checkoff sheet that the concept actually matches the building? Like, is that a problem that,
Yeah, if they don't build what's on the drawings, you don't approve it. You can't draw something and build something else.
yeah. Yeah,
Did they
I
go,
was-
for- can they go and ask to have a change that we don't really see? Sarah?
I don't know. I'm just commenting on the fact that they have nothing to do with each other because the building on the left looks really nice.
I
Yeah,
agree.
the one on the left is like, custom built, piece. The one on the right looks like a builder's special.
Yes.
right. So when we review the drawings, do we ask for, I don't know, like you said, we just make sure that the concept matches the building? Is that what we say to them? But
No,
but
I
once
think-
they build it, we're not gonna make
These
them
are-
tear it
these are
down.
the same.
Huh?
Is this supposed to be the same building? Is
Yeah,
this
it
the same- There's no way. How did this go from one to the other? There's a breakdown somewhere in our process here, or after it went from us to whoever else, there's a massive breakdown here.
I mean, look at the molding on the gables on the drawing and look at the molding on the gables and what got built.
Bob, do we know, who do we ask? I don't know where the breakdown happened because when it came to the planning board, I think we saw the same drawing, the same sketch. I guess, I don't know. I don't know how to fix it where, unless we ask for more than just a sketch. I don't know if anyone ever got the specs, with the,
The plans that were submitted for approved building matched what was approved by the ZBA. So the paperwork was fine. Somewhere in the execution, between planning and building is where it happened. That's probably the builder's fault. I don't know if at this point he can go back to probably the planning board because they were the special permit granting authority and say, oops, or and I don't even know if there's a legal way to get some sort of a variance or something like that. I mean, it's a difficult situation. I have to agree with both Dave and Dario that, from the concept plan to the finished product, your proportions are off, your gables are off, your roof pitches are off. The scale of the driveways, the scale of the garage doors. To be honest with you, in the original design, those look like single car garages, not 2-car garages.
Great.
To be completely honest, I mean, I'm just going by the image. I'm not scaling anything. I'm not measuring anything. But adding that extra 8 feet is gonna mess up your gable pitches from a 12 to those gables look like maybe a 6 pitch, maybe an 8 on a good day, but certainly not a 12.
Can I ask you a question? Because I don't know this answer. Is there anybody on the planning board who has the knowledge that Dario, myself, or Bob have?
No,
but Fred is at all the meetings. Like Fred is our staff and he reviews everything. And maybe this sketch, maybe the planning board, I just did these for pictures. That's a picture I had. I can go back and we can check exactly what was submitted to the planning board. Maybe between design review and planning board, something came in that changed everything.
Maybe
But
you
this-
show the design review board what looks nice and then you build the crap you want to build and everything's happy from the builder's perspective because they showed us a pretty picture and didn't build a pretty building.
No.
And I think that's kind of what happened. It went to design review twice, and then it came quickly to the planning board and said, oh, here's a duplex. It was approved by design review. And we all said, okay, it looks
Exactly.
nice. I don't know. I'd have to go back.
We approved Plan A and they built Plan B. That's
Oh.
what looks like happened because, and I wasn't involved in it, but I promise you, those have nothing to do with each other architecturally, proportionally, aesthetically, functionally, exactly what Bob said.
Yeah, Dara, you're spot on, but unfortunately, after it comes out of our hands, we have nothing to do with it. It's done.
Exactly. So lesson learned, I think whatever they submit to us, somehow the planning board has to see what we approved and make sure it's the same thing that they're looking at.
But the thing is, once they get it, they don't have, I mean, if it comes back to a change, they don't have our expertise. There's nobody there
Fair enough.
to really, I don't want to use police it because it's not a police state here, but have that knowledge to know that, hey, when they take a pretty picture and change it, this is what the result is. They have no idea that knowledge.
Yep, it's fundamental bait and switch.
Exactly, and they have no clue.
So,
Right. I don't know if I was on the board then or Michelle. I think Michelle, but when she brought it to us, I think it might have just been the concept plan, but I'll have to go back and look.
But that's all we get. We only get a concept. We're not going to get, the whole.
Site plan with the
We'll get a
dimension.
site plan, but we're not going to get the building, 2x4 construction, the whole bit. We don't get that. In the site plan review, we don't get that. We're just the overview. That's all we get, and then it goes on from us. We're not looking at, 2x4 construction, 2x6 construction. We're not looking at that type of a breakdown. That we don't get that.
And David, I don't think we need that. All we need is the
No.
basic floor plan and the elevations, because we're looking at an elevation. And you don't need to know what's behind it as much as the fact that it doesn't
agree.
look like what got built.
And we
Right.
get that. And we did have that. So I don't know where, again, that's where I go right back to, where was the breakdown? Because we had that. And after that, something got switched big time.
And the
Where
planning
is that
board,
breakdown?
and the planning board was supposedly got exactly what you guys got, so. we'll
That's
have to
Yeah,
check.
that's not what was built, because we.
Oh, I
had-
know,
Is the broken piece there, Amy?
right. So I guess,
If anything changes, I think if there's any change from what was submitted to the design review committee to what's getting built, if they're going to change it, the process might say, if it's minor, and they can determine minor, because I don't think we have to get into, tiny little things, but if there's any changes, in this case, to Bob's point, they added, I don't know, 16 feet to the width of the building. If you look at everything, even the space between the gables, that's not a minor change. That's chickens and oranges. I mean, we're not even in the fruit category at that point. And if there's any changes to what's submitted to the design review committee, and I'll say substantive changes, because we don't have to get into we're going to use a different gutter, the downspout. That doesn't matter. But this has nothing to do with what got built, other than it kind of sort of does the same thing. There's two garages on the right, gables in the middle, a bunch of doors and windows on the inside, but the proportion, the scale, the look, the feel is big. It's big. The garages went from, in this case, 16 feet to 24 feet. If I was to go out and measure.
Yeah, the total feel of this is totally different. It lost the charm completely.
Right.
Dario, I agree 100% here.
right. I guess, Bob, we'll have to figure out where it fell apart. I don't know. I'll see what was submitted to the planning board. But I think we got what you guys got, because it went quickly. It went from your meeting to our meeting. And it got approved. So we'll see where it fell apart to see how we can make sure it doesn't happen again.
Amy,
Yeah.
is there an area, like I said before, in we approve, you approve, the builder starts to build. He's obviously put more height on the building as well, because you can see the space above the doors. But is there a way that they could do a change order and then get the change order approved?
Without coming back to the boards.
Yeah.
And that would be Bob or Fred. I don't know what happens after it leaves you and after it leaves us. I don't know what happens.
Would they do that, Bob?
If they were to do a substantial change, You know, and again, we have to discuss what substantial would be, like Dario said. You know, the special permit granting authority was the group that approved the drawings. Okay, if what's getting built is going to be substantially different, they should probably go, and this is just my theory, they should probably go back to the design review and go back to planning board to amend the special permit.
Exactly.
Because the DRC is advisory to the planning board, and the planning board uses the DRC's comments to either approve or deny. And I think you'd have to go all the way back. If there's a substantial change, you'd have to go back to the DRC and, you know, again, put it back up to the planning board. You know, the question is, at what point in the process do they do this? I mean, when they start framing, you know, sometimes conditions in the field necessitate changes. And that's not much of an excuse. But what I see a lot of the times is once the developers get the approval, they just go ahead and build it. And it's very difficult to catch them, you know, midstream, you know, mid-construction to say, you know, you got to stop and, you know, go back to the board because, you know, what you're building is not on the plans, you know, or it's vastly different from the approved plans, I should say.
Right, by the time you notice it's probably framed, it's like, whoa, what happened there?
That's, yeah. And as you know, framers work pretty darn fast. And in terms of, you know, inspections, you know, from the time that the building department looks at the foundation and the backfill and everything else, the next time we're out there is when the electric, the plumbing, the HVAC has all been roughed in. The siding, the roofing, and the windows are installed. Okay, so that's in terms of the building code, that's a fairly large gap, and there's a ton of work that's done between foundation and the rough inspection and the rough frame inspection.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing on the inspectors. I think this has to be, the plans that are approved for construction have to match what the DRC approved. It's that simple. It's not, Bob can't be sitting there. If they need to move something 13 inches because they hit some crazy rock, that's not a big deal, but that's not what this was. And this wasn't the framer saying, oh, geez, I need to add 6 feet so both cars can fit. I need to double the interior windows because I want to turn that pantry into another bedroom. I mean, this thing is obnoxiously larger than what was submitted, and what that was submitted and what was approved to be built at that point is the breakdown, not once it's getting built. You're building, that framer's working off of drawings, and he may be off by an inch or two, but he's not adding 4 and 6 feet randomly at will because he just can't. So somewhere those drawings change from what we see on the picture to what got built. And that change is where the breakdown is, not anything once you start construction, because you're going to start construction on an exact set of drawings. And if someone says, hey, Bob, you don't mind if I add 20 feet to the building, he's not going to sit there and say, no problem, go ahead.
Right.
He's going to say, no, you got to go back to planning and zoning.
All right, well, we'll have to go back and see what happened, because I don't even know if the planning board got more than the sketch too. It was like, everybody is like, wow, this is the nicest duplex we've seen. Good luck, go ahead, you know? So we'll figure that out. I really don't know. Because
who was the builder for this too?
I think he sold it. It was a guy from Shrewsbury. Was it a guy from Shrewsbury? But then he sold it to Quality Framing, I think, who has built some houses in Southborough there. I'd have to follow the path, but I think when it came to us, it was a different person than who built it because they sold it. And maybe that's where it fell apart. Maybe the guy got the permit, sold it to someone else who said, oh, I'll make some tweaks there.
Because this can't happen again. There's no way.
Yeah. I don't remember. Was it a Sparrow? Who the guy was in, I don't know who it was. We'd have to look it up too. Yeah, and that's good to know too. So if they come back to the board with another one, you can say, hey, this is what you did last time. You can't do this again.
I think so. I like that idea, Amy.
Yeah. And it's hard to believe the stories we get on the planning board. And but when it first came to us, it was like, I really need the duplex because I want one side for my family and the other side for my disabled child. Like, that's what we get all the time.
Yeah, but that should have no bearing on it. You could say, I want one for Hitler's nephew and one for the Communist Party. We're not allowed to opine on politics.
I know, but that's what we try to say. They like, please approve our duplex because we're going to follow this plan and I need it for my family. So they try to like, I know it has nothing to do with it, but I'm just saying those are the stories we get.
Right. And I think shame on us for being that naive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I even noticed when he cleared the trees, they were supposed to clear so many and then come back and get earthworks to clear the fourth lot. And it just went all down at once. Like there's no coming back a lot of the time.
It's very interesting that you say that the plans were sold, the plans and the permit were sold. So that they figured that, well, we are kind of making it look like that. And we're going to just make some more, more space. So.
Yeah, well, we'll move on and, but we'll get to the bottom of what happened and who did it, just somehow where it fell apart. But my reason for some of these pictures were the guidelines. I felt the design for the two families, some of the criteria was so specific that some of the buildings that we think are nice in Northborough wouldn't fall under the guidelines the way they were written, like with garages on front. But these look okay because they put, different doors but our guidelines right now say you have to have 20% windows in the front and it can't include garages, but that wouldn't work. But when people go through this neighborhood, they say, oh, I like those. So I guess that's what I was trying to say when I look at these pictures. The guidelines are tricky because some are very specific, yet they don't match what we do in Northborough.
Can I just jump in real quick, Amy?
Sure.
Thank you. You got to be careful with the 20% window mandate in the front because windows come under the energy code.
Yep.
And, if you're loading up one side of the wall with windows, that's going to affect the energy requirements and the energy demands of the house. The other thing that's coming up is that the state is moving towards a net zero energy policy.
Yep.
And it's coming sooner than later. And that's going to have an effect on windows as well. I mean, you're obviously going to have higher performance windows, but in terms of the, which direction the walls of the house face, they're not going to be real happy if you're putting a lot of windows on the north side of a building. Okay, they're going to want it on the west and the south side because it's the north and the east side is just going to be too cold. So I would, in terms of the 20%, I would allow yourself a little variable for that, depending on the current energy code. And the thing is, the energy code has gone to a sliding scale. It's no longer a code. It's a set of what do they describe it now? It's a set of hard guidelines, basically. Okay, it is wrapped up in the energy code, but they're firming up all the guidelines in terms of what they want to do. So the basic structure of it is different, but the intent is still there. And going to a net zero, will probably have an effect on the placement and the amount of windows on any given elevation. The other thing I would just caution or advise is that, it's probably okay to talk about the structures themselves, what was presented, what was approved versus what was built. I would suggest that if you're going to be using names,
Yeah.
those people who are named should be here at the meeting.
You mean the
Yeah.
builder?
And yes, if you're talking names and applicants and things like that, it could be perceived that you're talking about them behind their back, and that would not be fair. And I think that would probably cause some concern for some people.
So we should have had the builder who did this here today on this piece.
If you're going to talk about it, and you're going to name names, yes.
Okay.
If
I won't
you're
name any
talking-
names.
If
And
you're
actually,
talking about it and not naming names, I think you're probably all set. But
Okay.
if it's, you're talking this person, that person, and who was in control and who was in command and why did they do this and why did they do that? It could be an issue. I'm just saying.
Okay.
If I was a builder and you're talking about stuff behind my back, I'd be looking for answers,
Okay.
to be
Well,
honest.
both of these pictures, I'm trying to say that the Board of Leaders in Northborough did a good job versus what we're asking for in the guidelines. So I was trying to say I think they did a great job with the one driveway. It's narrow and it spreads out.
Yeah.
And they kept a lot of the trees.
Yeah.
And for our duplexes too, the pictures and the guidelines show they're very specific, but I felt like these are older duplexes, but they fit in the neighborhood. I guess what I'm trying to say is that our duplex guidelines were they had too much information and too many specifics, where I think if you say it has to fit the character of the neighborhood, the massing and the height, I don't think we need so many regulations, like 20% of the windows have to be in the front because it doesn't fit with every lot in every building. I felt a lot of the guidelines were very too specific and we might get unintended consequences.
Mhm.
Where I think like these, they match the era, they match the neighborhood. You wouldn't even, when you're driving by, you wouldn't even know it was a duplex.
And what's interesting, Amy, is the three on the left.
Yep.
None of them would meet the new duplex guidelines, even though they're nice.
Well, that's what I
Because
was thinking.
The
Yeah.
ones on the left say, our guidelines say, oh, you have to have an overhang, a porch, or this over the main entry. And you take any cape that was made 100 to 300 years ago, none of them have an overhang over the front porch. Not that it's not nice, but all of a sudden we've become God here. And I think, to your point, being contextual, fitting in the neighborhood, human scale, not that I want any kind of subjective control, because there's nothing worse than subjective, where it's my opinion versus somebody else's, chocolate or vanilla. That can get real ugly real quick. But none of the ones on the left would meet our guidelines, yet they're all very nice. They're the right scale. They fit in with Northborough. They're things that we'd like to see. So it's really hard to put in exact rules on what you want without just saying, pick from one of these four floor plans. And if you don't pick those, you're not going to build it in our town. Because it's one of those, you're pointing out an exact example of it, that, they're nice, they're nice, cute buildings for this area. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nice vegetation, and the drives are good, whether they're in the front or on the side.
Right. That's the point I wanted to, and then I wanted hopefully everybody to go back and look at the design review guidelines again for the duplexes. And there were a lot of items I was crossing out, or maybe, I know Judy worked really hard on them, but maybe we use a checklist of ideas of things we could use, like bay windows, bow windows, but not so specific that we get the unintended consequences. Yes, Bob?
I haven't read the complete two family guidelines, but my impression is that what Judy prepared is advisory to you folks in terms of what you may or may not want to look for. And I may be redundant here, but I don't know if what Judy gave to the town needs to be taken as, the Bible, and, I would suggest, and I could be way off, but I would suggest that maybe, take bits and pieces where you think this would fit in Northborough, this wouldn't fit in Northborough, and just use it as a guideline. Because like you said, sometimes depending on the neighborhood, you're going to want a lot of gables, okay? Or in some other neighborhoods, you're not going to want a lot of gables because the house is going to really stick out like a sore thumb. So I would suggest leaving yourself some flexibility in terms of, what is a hard and fast rule versus, guidelines to consider. Okay, I'm just saying allow yourself some flexibility because we've got a variety of neighborhoods, and not for nothing, but from what I'm seeing, and I'm not a design expert, but what I'm seeing with a lot of these duplexes going up is they're all starting to look alike.
Right. No, we
You know?
definitely do. I think when I read the guidelines, I know there were advisory, but as a design review person, I'm going to read these guidelines and say, well, like some of the statements were the driveways, you shall have one driveway and stack the cars. Like that wouldn't work at my house. Never mind. That doesn't work at my house. Never mind if you have two families sharing
Right.
a parcel. There's no way in Northborough people are going to want one long driveway and you stack your cars. There were just certain, like, it wasn't all of them. It was just I just wanted everybody to go back before the next meeting and maybe we can talk about the guidelines. And I think a couple things might have to be striked out because they're just too strict for Northborough and they don't. And a lot of the pictures, like there are a lot of pictures that say encouraged, encouraged, encouraged. And I looked at those pictures and they're from Boston. I'm like, I would not want to encourage that. And this is what the guideline gets handed to the developer. So I don't want to waste their time getting a book that we're going to encourage one driveway with stacked cars where that's not what I think I would want to see in Northborough. I was hoping the committee could go back and read them and look at what we have in Northborough and read them and say, okay, the ideas that don't fit in Northborough, maybe we should strike just to begin with. So that builders don't waste their time on things that we're never going to approve. It's.
To your point, Amy, I get a PM on my Facebook from Damon Amato last week and asking for the guidelines. And he said he tried to get them at downtown hall for duplexes, but he didn't want to bother Fred because he was so busy. I invited him to come to one of our meetings because I can't do any more than that. And there are builders that are looking for that kind of guidance. And that Bob makes a great point. What Judy gave us was a framework that we could probably take and change to happen in Northborough with Northborough's neighborhoods and such. So I think that what you're doing today is perfect. That's why we're discussing it. And
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
one more point before I forget. Bob talked about the windows and where the placement of the windows are. And when you have duplexes, aren't there walls that are just no windows at all? And does that apply to a duplex as it does to a house, Bob? Because there are walls that have no windows, even a sidewall.
Well, there are sidewalls that sometimes have no windows at all. Okay. But there's a certain, under the building code, there's a certain amount of visible light transmittance that's required in any given room. There's also a certain amount of natural ventilation that's required in any given room. So it's a balance. Obviously, if you've got a duplex, the center wall separating the two units won't have any windows in it, obviously, because it's a firewall. But you'll see an occasional building where the gable ends don't have any windows, or maybe one small one. Typically you're going to want to see windows in the front and the back, the front for the street and the back for, being able to look out into the backyard. Most of our lots here are primarily wooded. You're not looking into somebody else's property. You want to see what nature has to offer. So yeah, you could have some walls that have no windows in it, and you could have some walls that are entirely windows. But it all has to work within the framework. When you do an energy audit on a house to be built, they take all of the solid walls and all the windows and all the doors into account, and they put it into a matrix and they score it. And it needs to meet a certain score. If it doesn't, the designer has to go back and respec windows or reallocate where they're going to be installed.
Do we have to, through the chair, do we have to learn some of that so that when we're looking at a plan, or who's,
No, you guys, you don't have to go to window school or energy school.
Thank goodness.
I've been through it. It's pretty torturous. No, we'd let you know.
All right.
You know?
That's helpful to us when we're looking at a plan too, to say, here's something that is coming up with compliance.
Mhm.
Much like the sidewalk width that's changing because of the complete streets policy that we agreed
Mhm.
to.
So we're doing some net zero. Different towns are advancing differently in Massachusetts. We're doing a school in Wellesley that's going to be net zero.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's stuff that really shouldn't be our concern. We're really here to look at aesthetics and scale. It'll be up to the developers. I won't even say the builders, because sometimes it's not the builder, it's the developer who may hire a builder, but whoever owns that parcel and is developing the property will have to comply with the codes. And I think to Bob's point, we don't want to specify all glass on a certain wall. That makes it really hard to meet the net zero codes, but we can say we'd like glass on the front elevation, as opposed to, the building that got built on the corner of Brigham and 20, where the front elevation on Brigham is a bunch of compressors, a transformer, and a pile of electrical meters all facing the main street. I mean, that's just appalling. And that's what the DRC should be preventing, not code issues. We also in here point out on the design on page 8 of our design code that you must have side windows, windows on the side of the house. And again, getting into those type of details can get you into trouble, because if the side of my house is facing a gas station or something I don't want to look at, I'd rather not put windows there. And to Bob's point, face the trees or at least the main street. One of the things that I saw during presenting to myself on the other side of the table, I was presenting to the DRB, and they were doing in houses, and they were saying, geez, you're building a real big house next to little houses. So they had, and it goes again back to Bob, every neighborhood is a little bit different. So when we get into contextual, I think that's probably the best word, that you want to be in context to what your neighbors have. If you go in my neighborhood, it's, I don't even care for it, actually. It's a little too yuppified for me, but they're all kind of big box houses. The cape's not going to fit there. And if you go in a neighborhood with a bunch of capes and raised ranches, my house doesn't fit there. And they're both in Northborough. So what they did in this town was, and it was amazing, because the developer tried to trick the town and got the well-deserved spanking, because they said, oh yes, in regard to your design guidelines, here's a picture of the two houses, here's our house, look, they're the same. And then the Lisa or the David on the DRC said, well, that's funny, I drove down the street yesterday and the 27 other houses are less than half the size of yours. Stop trying to trick us, cheat us, and insult our intelligence. It's not contextual. And I think that's where we go with this, is if you're in a neighborhood with a bunch of little houses, then you fit in with that neighborhood. If you're in a neighborhood with a bunch of capes, kind of make it look like a cape. It doesn't have to be an exact copycat, but let it look like it fits in. It's contextual, which is the word we're really looking for, and contextual to the neighborhood, not to the town of Northborough. Because you can find anything you want here, to say, oh, look, this is in Northborough. Right? We
Right.
could say, and that's what we don't want. We don't want to say, let's match, what's the place that took over Beezer's? You know, we've got 6 of these, let's put 6 more, you know,
Right.
because it's already here.
Well, to that point too, we just saw, what is it, 89 Hudson? And,
399, yep.
okay, not here on the, no, our last meeting.
Oh, 87.
So when I asked, how is this in terms of the size to the neighborhood, knowing that there's smaller houses everywhere? And they use the example of the industrial building, saying, well, the industrial building is very large, therefore we come in the middle, we balance that. Is that real? I mean, is that something that, I mean, I would think the neighborhood is the neighborhood. You're not looking at industrial buildings in a neighborhood that's still residential primarily. So when you take a house down that's, I don't know, even 1,000 square feet, and then you put in 6,000 square feet, is that keeping with the neighborhood?
That's a tough one, Lisa, because 2 lots down from there, I think is like a little apartment complex.
Yes, maybe.
You know, and that's, the guy could say, well, here, next door to me is a parking lot for the industrial. Then next to me is a development of, I think there's apartments. I don't remember 100%. That's a really tough one, because within 300 feet of that, you probably have a little bit of everything. I don't know that there's really context there. That's a really difficult one to judge. If you say, oh, if we're heading north or east, the houses are small. But if you're heading west, it's commercial and multifamily. So it's kind of a transition spot.
So
And then I
maybe,
think, don't we have a street with a cul-de-sac with what do you call it, homes right on it that are pretty sizable as well too, right?
Yeah, that's my point.
We kind of have everything on that road there.
That's the hard part about judging that one, is there's so much around it that if I fairly look to the left, it's one thing. If I fairly look to the right, it's something else. And those get to be difficult. That's one where, you know, I kind of, if it looks nice, hold up the white flag and say, okay. But you can't, unless you want to draw a line by zoning, which you can do and say, this is the type of house that belongs in this zone. Wherever that line is, you can stick to the zone then.
so then and I've asked this in the past, to have a Google Maps picture of it in the neighborhood, like here's the lot, here's the neighborhood, here's the abutting properties, or even a bird's eye view of that, to be able to better assess that, because isn't that what we're looking at, is how it is in that neighborhood? So if you have, do you put it into a certain range? Like, we do radiuses, if it's in this radius, then this is the type of neighborhood that's at, or we're trying to change the neighborhood look. Like I know in Needham, I have a friend who lives on a beautiful street that was all originally capes and ranches, and now they're all two-story colonials. So they've gone and changed the whole neighborhood with the exception of 3 houses. So we're in that transition stage now where we're getting a lot of older properties that people are selling, and we're trying to create what I'm assuming with the master plan, we're trying to create an environmental feel for each of these neighborhoods. So how, is it too much to ask to have that sort of a visual so that we better can understand where it does sit in the neighborhood? And then, the layout of the plan can be superimposed on top.
I think that makes sense, Lisa, but in that particular case, again, if you drew a circle around it, half the buildings around will be bigger, half will be smaller. Then how do you pick? You can't favor one or the other. If it's half and half, they're kind of in the middle.
Okay.
That's a tough one. If they're all small, then there's no argument. If 82% of them are small, there's no argument. But that was a weird one. I'm not saying that I'm in love with it or I like what they're doing, but it was hard to say, gee, the neighbors on all 4 sides of you are less than 2,000 square feet, because that's not the case there. I mean, that's a tougher circle. If you drew a circle around that one, it would be hard to find a pattern.
Well, like going back to like Lisa, what you said about Needham, like I do a tremendous amount of work in Needham, Newton, Weston, Wellesley, and they're taking all these small homes, knocking them down, and what I call building the mansions, where they'll knock two of them down sometimes and make it into one lot, and putting these homes that like there's very little even green space on them left, and they're just unbelievable. And then all of a sudden you get this little home that's left over from the 40s or 50s next to it, and then another massive construction, and then little ones, and it's just it's oh my god. And slowly they're all turning into these large scale construction, and that's just all over the place, and there's no rhyme or reason to say yay or nay to them, and they have to let them do what they're doing. So you look at that and like what we're doing here, it's not to the scale of what's going on over there, but it happens, and it's just that's what's happening. But this is not as bad as that, like what you brought up over there.
No, I'm just talking about trends, basically.
Yeah. And that is a trend that's happening out that direction. And it's happening here, but not as bad as what's going on over there. And not that it's bad, it's just that's what's going on.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's one last thing on this, which gets a little bit awkward again. A lot of times, and I'm only doing it, this is on kind of my firsthand experience. We're putting up 7 houses in Wareham on the ocean, and the people in the town, it's one of these exact same things that Dave's talking about, and this is where we have to find out where Northborough wants to go with it. So next to our development, there's a 9-acre parcel, I don't know, it's worth $10 million or whatever. On the other side, there's another nice one. They both have docks going into the water. But all the area around that are these tiny cottages and capes and raised ranches that are, just cute, wonderful little neighborhoods. Now, what the town wants is they don't want to, and I'll put in quotes, increase the density of the area. So when we did 1-acre minimum lots, we took, and it goes back to what you're saying, Lisa, we took a 500-foot circle from where we were and listed all the properties, the size of the lots, and we were decreasing the density, which was the goal of the town. And in decreasing the density, you end up building bigger homes. But that was their goal. And that may not necessarily be our goal. So whatever our goal is, if you take a 500-foot circle around where we're trying to build, state our goals. And our goals may be, we want to be contextual. We want this house to fit in with the houses within 500 feet of here. That may be our goal, as opposed to Wareham's goal. Because Wareham is saying, oh, look, they're 1 house per acre. We're 4 houses per acre. They're decreasing the density. That's what we want. So different towns want different things. So if we want contextualism, which it sounds like that's what we want, I'm not saying that's what we want, but if that's what we want, we draw a 5-foot circle or a 500-foot circle, look at how big things are and see that this is in context with and then it takes it from subjectivity to pure math. And that's back to Bob's point, we have different neighborhoods, so that will combine that into, is it a 500 or 300-foot circle, and I think ours was 1,000 feet, because 500 isn't that much when you have 150-foot minimum, frontage, but I think it was like 1,000 feet, or pick a dimension and then see that you fit within, or a neighborhood that you fit within that.
I think that's great. Because you establish what it is you're looking for.
Yes,
You have ways now to be able to
measure.
One of the things I may want to suggest, if I might, is we have a new planner starting on March 7th. And I happen to know this individual and I've worked with her before. And she's very good at doing this sort of thing. One thing I would recommend is if you have a draft that's been submitted to the town, and you want to make changes to it, be sure to incorporate Laurie into any kind of changes you may want to make to it. The other thing is, if you're going to be making changes to what was submitted, would it be worthwhile going to or working with or deferring to the Master Plan Implementation Committee? Okay. I may be throwing a wrench into the works here, but we've got two things going on here. We've got the Master Plan Implementation, which took a long time. And then we had Judy Barrett's work that took a long time. And I think the planner would be able to help mesh the two together so they're not in disagreement with each other.
Are you talking about the duplex guidelines?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd wait for the Master Plan Implementation Committee, because we're working on downtown and we have, like, everything gets pushed to the Master Plan Implementation Committee. But when you're on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, there are some groups that are actually checking off boxes, like they're bringing, the Parks and Rec is bringing forth a dog park that people wanted, but they're not funneling it through the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And there are other things, like I feel like we're focusing on downtown, and I think how the duplexes fit in downtown maybe, but I think if you want the Master Plan Implementation Committee to look at duplexes, it could be years out. Like, I don't even see that on the radar. I agree with talking maybe to Lori about it, but really Judy did a great job with the bylaws, the guidelines. But what I'm thinking is, I just had a couple of things that I thought didn't fit with Northborough, so I'm going to strike them out, and I was going to send it to the whole board. So maybe at the next meeting we can discuss it. I can bring up all the suggestions. Say there's like 10 of them. We go down the list and say, yes, this meets Northborough. No, this doesn't meet Northborough. I mean, the Master Plan Implementation Committee is just a group of other residents, just like we are, and you guys have worked with duplexes and housing, and I don't know if anybody on that committee would know more than Dario. Well, Dario's on the committee and I'm on the committee. But Dave has experience and Lisa has experience being on this board. So I don't know if anybody, I don't know what you think, Dario, but I think sending duplex guidelines off to them,
I guess,
be adding more to the mix.
I wasn't suggesting sending it off to them for approval.
yeah,
I'm just saying, if there's something in the Master Plan Implementation, understanding that the main goal right now is a downtown area, but just refer to that so that whatever it is you guys decide to do as a DRC, okay, are at least in line with what the goals and objectives are for the town-wide master plan. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, I'm not saying go to them for approval or anything.
Okay, I didn't want to throw more people in the mix.
No.
Well, so I'm all right. So I'm 90% on board with. Well, I'm probably half and half. I shouldn't say that. I am on the Master Plan Implementation Committee. We have the priority for the downtown, but to Bob's point, the right hand should always know what the left hand's doing here, because if we're doing something that's totally off with it, so we're not going to them for approval and we don't have to wait for them. But if they say, hey, Master Plan Implementation Committee, here's what we're doing for the duplexes. If you got any thoughts or ideas, let us know. It can be informal, but at least we can sit there and go, oh, geez, you know what? And I can think of one example, Amy. We'd like to have sidewalks. So maybe when we're doing this, all of a sudden, when they're building the duplexes, they have to put sidewalks in the front, so eventually we can help with the walking across the entire town. And that wouldn't come up unless the right hand's talking to the left hand. And it's not like approval and slow it down and wait 4 years for something to happen. But even this conversation right now, because you and I are cross-pollinating, Amy, it's something that I can tell you right now, from the Master Plan Implementation Committee's perspective, I would put a guideline in this to say, oh, by the way, it'd be nice to have a sidewalk in the front because we eventually want to have the town of Northborough be walkable. And that's 100% in line with what Bob's saying. But to your point, we have a focus downtown right now on the master plan, but we don't want to lose sight of other things that are happening that should eventually all tie back together. There's too many balls in the air to ignore the rest of them.
Okay, that
Does that
sounds
make
good.
sense?
I thought you meant like sending them the guidelines and having them read them and.
Oh, no, 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 no.
That's just right hand, left hand. But I think, Bob, I think something really good came out of this too, because there is something we're trying to do there that ties into this. And the fact that it got brought up, we can make these guidelines try to be in sync with the rest of the town.
Well, it's, it's with today's, everything is changing these days, and, if you're talking about the future look of the town and things like that, I just think it would be wise to, at least recognize what everybody else is doing. So I hate to use the cliche, but make sure the ship is sailing in the right direction, and they're all going together. That's all I'm saying. Because,
And I think-
yeah.
And I think we learned something else too about right hand and left hand. Amy, when you showed us the picture of the rendering and what got built, that's another right hand, left hand not communicating.
Right.
Here the DRC says, this is beautiful, we love it, build it. And then we get this piece of junk because we're not communicating. We have to have a process where if one of the other groups changes it, whoever had a comment on it before it got changed should go back to the people, the advisory committee, whether it's Concom or water overlay. If you're going to make a significant change, go back through the process so that we don't drop a ball.
Okay.
Can I ask, again, because we know that the permit changed hands, is there something in the approval from the planning board or from the ZBA that can specify that if the project is sold before it's created, that they have some contact and come before the board, or is that too far reaching?
The special permit, unless otherwise stated, goes with the property.
Exactly.
So if you have an approved plan with an approved applicant, and then they decide to change midway through or partway through the process, the new owners or whoever is coming in new to the project is responsible to stay with that original special permit decision.
Correct.
Okay, so but how do we prevent, we talked about in the beginning, how do we prevent this sort of thing from happening again? Is there a vehicle or a way to put in that now that it's changed hands, yes, it does go with the land, but you still have to conform to what was agreed to?
That's the universal understanding. That's,
Yeah.
You shouldn't, contractors and developers, they know that.
Everybody knows that, Lisa. It broke down with us, not with the developer. We had something at the DRC and it got changed, and it doesn't matter who the developer was. When it got changed, it never came back. And that's
Right.
not up to the developer. It's up to us to enforce that.
We have to figure out where the failure was.
Yep.
There was a failure somewhere, and the number one step is to figure out where that failure was. That has to be identified. Once that failure is identified, then we can move forward to figure out what can be done. Until the
Exactly.
failure is identified, we have no idea.
Right.
How will we do that?
That's someone has to find that failure. That's out of, now we have to go to the planning board and someone, I don't know, Bob, is that your end to figure that out or who? I don't know.
I'm gonna have to look into it, to be honest with you.
And just follow the paper trail.
Yeah,
Right.
it's gonna be black and white.
Yeah.
Somewhere
Okay.
it went from pretty picture to not pretty picture.
Yeah, it's gonna be in blueprints.
Okay. It's like 10 of 10 now. So I want to know what you want to, I think we should wrap it up probably by 10.
Yeah, because I got people all over the place here, got a lot of activity
Right,
happening. I'm gonna jump out.
right. I sent everybody out the 2 family guidelines and I did read through them and there were a couple that I want to strike, but I'll send it out to everybody. And everybody can tell me if they have anything they want to strike out for the next meeting, and then we can all review it and talk about it at the next meeting. And then there's a design review checklist that I wanted to go through. Since we only have like 10 more minutes, I don't know if it's worth starting now. We could send out the design review check sheet. I just think we should all be on the same page with what we're asking for the applicant, what we expect to see. I can share really quickly. And then I can email it out to everybody. It's just a design review checklist about what we need at the informal meeting. What we expect from the landscaping plan, lighting, parking, sidewalk. It's just a check sheet that me as a new person on the board and the chair, I know this is what's going to happen at the first meeting, second meeting. This is what we're looking for. This is what the applicant has to bring. I just wanted to go back over a check sheet. And I could send this out to everybody too, and we could talk about it at the next meeting.
That sounds good. I'd like
Sounds
to-
good. Okay. And then the last thing on the agenda is Lisa had brought something forward about 89 West Main. I think she might have had some questions. Lisa, you could ask Bob while we have our last few minutes.
So because I wasn't, I mean, Dave and Bob are probably the only 2 left that saw the original plans.
Mhm.
And just,
Which one's 89 West Main? Just refresh my brain for a minute.
89 West Main is at the corner of Monument. It was
Oh, yeah, I got it.
7 residential units up top and 3 or 4 commercial on the bottom.
That's the one that it's been a mess. Yes.
Right. And it continues to be a mess.
Yep.
Why don't I give you my little spiel on it, and it may
Go
answer
ahead.
a bunch of your questions. This and it continues to be a very difficult project. I'm not even sure who owns the building anymore without doing some research. The building was constructed basically to code, but it had a bunch of conditions on it. And the site plan was approved, and they constructed the building. They ran into financial issues, and they begged and pleaded for a conditional occupancy for the residential only,
Yeah.
so that they get some cash flow moving into that building, into the project. I said, I want an as-built done by the engineer of record. And before I do that, so they submitted that to me, and also Fred Litchfield. And while the building was done pretty much to what was approved, they've got a pile of site plan issues that need to be resolved.
Yes.
I told them, and it's a mess. I've got a letter from the engineer, and I made my own notes on the approved site plan. There's probably 15 to 20 things that need to be done. I mean, they've actually encroached over the property line on other people's property for certain parts of the site plan. And I told them that while I'm okay allowing them to the residents to get in, because it's all safe for them, and for them to start recuperating some of their money or generating some sort of cash flow. But I told them I would not, under any circumstances, issue any building permits for the commercial space down below until all of the issues on the site plan are 100%.
Yeah.
so that's where it stands right now.
That's where it stands right now.
So, and that was what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
At least.
So
My
there's-
question is, he has it for sale. What if it sells and changes hands and then,
It sticks
That
with the
person doesn't-
property, Amy.
It is the property.
Stays with the
Okay.
property. The new owners assume responsibility for all of the issues that's going on that property.
They'll take on that burden, which it may force them not to sell it, because if I gotta buy the building and it's gonna cost me $500,000 or $200,000 to fix it, whatever I pay you, I'm subtracting that from what I pay you, because that sticks with the property.
Mhm.
I
That's
just hope
theirs.
the buyer knows, hopefully,
Well, the
doesn't.
buyer, well, I think the buyer, you have to disclose it legally in real estate.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, even you drive by that property, you can see it's a nightmare.
Well-
I've actually had several people come to me with zoning interpretation forms for the commercial space downstairs. And, after I do the review, would it be allowed in this area? Yeah, whatever. I also tell them that, there is a laundry list of site plan issues that need to be complete and addressed before I even think about issuing or receiving an application for a building permit.
Well, here's one of my questions is the ad that, that I saw, they're offering it to a buyer to, if they don't want to use the commercial, they can just change those areas downstairs into residential.
They'd
And
have
just,
to go back, they'd have to go back to the board. Because that was a special permit granted by the planning board.
Yeah, for mixed use, if I recall.
And
it
it's a
was
mixed use.
ZBA. It went to the
So,
ZBA.
ZBA, okay, so they're gonna have to go back and either get a variance or whatever, because to have that building be completely residential, would have to go back to the boards. And I think you're probably looking at a use variance, and I don't want to speak for the ZBA, but I don't see that happening.
No.
Because it's gonna throw off your parking, it's gonna throw off, the facades. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
do you want to live in a storefront?
Yeah, because that was built, the parking lot, when we did it, that was made for a storefront parking lot, the whole thing
Yes.
to face the road. The parking was a special variance for the parking to face the road, because all the parking was supposed to be behind the building. That was a whole, if I recall, 4 or 5 meetings just on that, it was a whole thing there.
Mhm.
The landscape is they are not to code in the landscape in any way, shape, or form. I can just keep going with a grocery list of stuff that's in my head from what I recall from that. It's a disaster there.
But I think Bob said it pretty simply, and the only leverage that you have over them is pretty fundamental. Keep your word, do what you promised to do, and then you can occupy the building.
I agree.
Because if you let them occupy it prior to that, you can't make them do anything. So I think Bob's doing the right thing. He was being a good guy and went above and beyond by letting them occupy the top, and then you let them occupy the bottom, you're a fool.
Yep.
Because then they just say, ha ha, tricked you.
Yeah.
or can we at least take that sign down that says coming soon? It's been about 4 years. It's come. If they want to advertise, then they should have a different kind of a sign, but that people have talked to me about the fact they're coming out of that street and they can't see because it blocks their vision.
That actually is on the engineer's report. And they took one sign down, and I think they didn't read the right report because they took the wrong sign down.
Well,
So they are on my radar list of zoning issues to be fixed. Because that does create a blind spot. In terms of what's on the sign, Lisa, if they're advertising, full residential, that's their issue, and they're gonna have to, they'll find out they're wrong at some point, but they can put anything they want on a sign.
Well, I agree with you. Don't let them have any occupancy whatsoever. It's too
No.
much wrong there.
No. And then the thing is, they've been, like I said, the contractors were difficult, applicants were difficult. Really, there's not a lot on this project that went smooth. And I'll just leave it at that.
And is there anything that some laws that we can have, like put a lien on them so that they can't sell until they fix?
No,
The burden goes on the buyer, Lisa, and the buyer should be acutely aware of the restrictions on the site.
All right, well, I'm glad we got to talk about it because it has been a lot of conversations and I'm not having the background. It's good to hear about it.
Yeah.
So,
those issues were sent out to the owners at the end of January in 2020.
mm.
So that's what, 2 years now?
Yeah.
Didn't that when they were up for sale after that?
Well, I think they had those, not the for sale sign, but the available for lease space signs up there, before that went up pretty quick. Yeah. Yeah, but they do have to move that big sign because it does represent a kind of a blind spot.
Well, I think it was a good discussion overall today with everything we talked about. Usually we have applicants, so we don't get to do any sort of planning or talking so I thought this was great, and thanks for everybody for coming. And
I want to say, it seems like we work together like a really good team, which I think is a great thing.
yep,
What
I
that's
agree.
worth. I felt comfortable. It seemed like there were no agendas but the right thing, and hats off to everybody for that.
I agree. Did a great job, Amy, and this is what it should be, that we can have discussion and learn and create, since we're creative, right? The design review is supposed to be all about creative.
Right, and solve problems, which is what we're trying to do. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks. So I'll send out some stuff over the next month for our next meeting next month that we can.
We have to formally adjourn.
We do have to formally adjourn.
Okay.
Anybody make a motion that we adjourn?
I so move the motion.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'll take a roll call vote. Lisa Maselli,
Aye.
Dario Damari,
Aye.
and Dave Ver-